Welcome everyone. Welcome to Office Hours with Michael Kitces. For today's Office Hours, obviously I'm in a little bit different than usual location. I was traveling this week speaking for a conference for Salesforce. Now I'm actually getting ready to teach the retirement section for Investment Wealth Institute's Private Wealth Advisor program. I wanted to talk for today's Office Hours about an unusual conflict I'm seeing that's cropping up more and more as the advisory industry shifts to the AUM model. That it was something that actually hit me personally in working with clients, and I thought was worth talking about today. So the conflict that came up in our firm a couple of years ago went basically like this. So we had a client we've been working with for a few years. They came on board back in 2004 to do retirement planning with us since they were retiring and rolling over a time was a very nice $1 million retirement account. And we did the retirement plan to project the impact of their Social Security and their portfolio withdrawals to make sure that they could afford to retire and come up with an appropriate investment allocation and then actually manage their retirement portfolio on an ongoing basis. And because we're a firm that does a combination of financial planning and investment management for a combined AUM fee, like we package this all together. We do the planning and then we help you manage the retirement portfolio. Except the problem was that this client was spending at a dangerously high level. They were getting about $4,000 a month in Social Security as a married couple, which back then is a pretty good number. They'd had good incomes over the years, but they were spending about $100,000 a year. So they were taking almost $60,000 a year plus their taxes from their $1 million portfolio, which if you do the math is about a 6% withdrawal rate and somewhat concerning. Technically, it still works more than half the time. The median historical safe withdrawal rate is actually pretty close to 6.5%, but most of us advisors don't sleep well at night. When you do a Monte Carlo projection for a client, it shows up at like 60 or 70%. Theirs was just over 70%. And despite all of our warnings, they wouldn't change their spending behavior. They kept going. And after about 3 years of this, in 2007, they came and announced that they were terminating the relationship with us and consolidating their retirement account away to another advisor they were working with, which for me led to basically three big surprising realizations. Number one, they actually had another advisor that we didn't know about. Number two, they had assets with another advisor that we didn't know about. And three, they didn't actually have a spending problem in the first place. We thought they were overspending because they didn't want to tell us about the other assets because they were afraid that if they told us about the other held away assets, we would have pushed them to consolidate all of it with us, which is, in retrospect, probably true. We probably would have because that's what we tend to do when we're on the AUM model. But the problem that I didn't appreciate at the time is the conflict that crops up when clients don't necessarily want to be solicited upon other assets to be managed when we're on an AUM model. So they may not tell us about all the assets because they don't want to have that conversation, which then leads to a dysfunctional planning relationship because we don't know about all the assets, which in retrospect, for us was probably what blew up the relationship. Because they weren't unhappy with the work that we'd done. 2004 to 2007 was a good cycle in the markets. Investment performance was good. We'd given them good service. We were very proud of the planning work that we'd done. But they were tired of having us bug them as good advisors about their irresponsible spending because they knew they didn't actually have a spending problem. They just couldn't tell us that we were wrong because then they would have had to reveal the other assets that they didn't want to reveal because they were afraid that we would solicit them to consolidate with us. And the reason I'm highlighting this problem is that as more and more of the advisory industry shifts to the AUM model and packages together financial planning and investment management, I think that this problem and the frequency of this problem is going to get a lot worse going forward from here. So a little exercise in market sizing. There are about 115 million households in the U.S. Roughly a third of them have at least $100,000 of investable assets outside their primary residence. That's Spectrum Research market sizing. So this is the segment we call the mass affluent, at least $100,000 in investable assets. About 10% of them have at least $1 million. About 1% of them are ultra high net worth, so $5 million or more. Now the truth is we can't even work with all of those households. I guesstimate probably roughly half of them have that money tied up in an employer retirement plan that most of us can't directly manage until they retire or otherwise separate from service and have a rollover opportunity. And of course, not all of them are necessarily good prospects for us because some are going to be do-it-yourselfers who aren't going to hire an advisor. Some may occasionally want to hire advisors for advice incrementally or part-time, but they don't want to delegate all the investment management to us. Forrester Research has done some good work on this. Their estimate is only about a quarter to a third of all consumers are really delegators who want to fully delegate the investment management process to an advisor in the first place. Those people that we usually call good clients because they're easy to work with and they like to delegate to us. So about a third of the households are at least mass affluent, but only half of those have money available outside of retirement plan. And only about a third of those are probably delegators who would have hired an advisor. So you go all the way through and you do the math, it ends up being about 7 or 8 million households. According to Cerulli, there are about 300,000 financial advisors in the U.S., which means if you go through that math, there are about 21 clients per advisor in that AUM model. That's it. 21 clients per advisor, 5 of them are millionaires. Ironically, that actually means that if all clients really did consolidate all assets to one advisor, as many of us try for and ask them to do, a whole bunch of us would go out of business in the AUM model. I think the only reason why we can have 300,000 financial advisors chasing the same 7 or 8 million delegator households is that basically clients cheat on us, as those clients were. They split assets across multiple advisors, and they don't necessarily tell us about it because they don't want to be solicited. Which is technically good for financial advisor job opportunities. When each client hires multiple advisors, it keeps more of us employed. But it undermines the planning relationship. Now, in truth, it's probably not quite as bad as I'm making it out because not all advisors are doing the AUM model right now. Some just do various financial products and don't compete for managed accounts, which means they may not literally be competing for that same pool of assets. They may be working with other clients who need certain financial products, but just don't have investable assets in the first place. They just need life insurance or other assistance. Some advisors do hourly planning and retainer fees and sort of other types of clients who don't have assets to manage but will pay for planning from their income. So they're serving, or they're just serving clients who have assets but don't want to delegate the portfolio and just want to pay for other advice. So we might not be competing for quite as narrow of a pie as I'm making it out, and that's actually why I'm so upbeat about opportunities of other models like monthly retainer fees, not to compete with the AUM model for AUM clients, but to reach other clients the AUM model doesn't serve, so that we don't have to all be the same 300,000 advisors competing for the same 7 or 8 million clients. Nonetheless, as more and more of us converge on the AUM model and more advisors are approaching that, doing financial planning investment management for a 1% fee, the more we're likely to have clients where we're focusing on assets, they split assets, we're doing planning to add value, but they're not telling us about all the assets because they don't want to be solicited, which undermines the planning and creates problems. And the key point really is just to recognize that sometimes when clients have spending problems, it's not actually a spending problem. That was what I missed in that client relationship, a lesson learned as we lost the client. Sometimes it's actually a relationship problem, in essence, because they have other assets and they're not comfortable telling us. That was the realization I didn't have or discover until it was too late. And it led, from my perspective, to be even more focused actually on leading with financial planning first, but to be less aggressive about trying to encourage clients to consolidate everything with us in a holistic relationship. Because I know that ultimately, if we do good financial planning work and we give good advice and we have a good investment process and we do all the right things, eventually we're going to win most of the business in the long run. And frankly, we have over the years. And to make sure we don't lose money in the upfront planning work, we have investment minimums that we put in place. That's just a necessary business reality to ensure that you have enough revenue per client to cover the overhead and the cost of doing business. But in the past, regardless of our investment minimums, I'll admit that I used to push more for the holistic nature of our relationship, and both because I value holistic planning and holistically managing a portfolio, and because it was good business to have clients do all their business with us. And now with a few more years of experience, I'm much more comfortable letting clients just start with us with a portion of assets where we're doing all of the planning work that we do and some of the investment work, and use that to build trust so that they're really open with us. So at least they tell us about everything because we're not pushing them to consolidate all at once. And they don't feel pressured. And then just do the good planning work where we know about everything and let our good work and our good service and our good planning results win the rest of the household relationship over time. Because again, I'll admit, in my early years, I underestimated how much pushing we have to be holistic. We have to do everything together. We must work on everything all at once. Trying to be a good comprehensive advisor actually risked undermining the entire foundation of the client relationship because it made some clients not want to reveal everything, which then made an inaccurate plan and a very dysfunctional planning relationship. So if you find yourself in this position, consider just how the advisor-client relationship can get impacted when you're on the AUM model and you may be pushing too hard or harder than you realize for people to consolidate with you and be holistic and do everything with you all at once, rather than getting to some productive working relationship with them and winning the rest of their business over time, but just being good at what you do and delivering good results. And if you actually have a client who has a spending problem and is heavily overspending and just keeps ignoring your advice, yeah, maybe they do have a spending problem, but if they were successful in accumulating assets in the first place to be working with you as a reasonably affluent individual, they probably actually have learned reasonable spending habits, which means this may be a different problem, one where they don't actually trust you enough and feel comfortable with you as much as maybe you thought, and they're hiding assets. I didn't think this was happening until I found out it was. And now I'm a little bit more humble about the fact that sometimes when we think we have everything with the clients we're working with, we don't necessarily, and we still have to always be in the process of winning their trust. And I think that actually by being more flexible about not always working with them with everything all at once, we want to be holistic on the planning, but we don't have to do everything in the portfolios all at once, that it's actually improved the long-term advisor-client relationships that we have, which gets us to the point where they end up doing all their business with us anyways. But in any event, I hope that's helpful food for thought, and perhaps a new take on a different potential issue to think about if you've got clients with spending problems that might not actually be spending problems, and just to understand that if you really want to be planning holistically with clients, you recognize you have to build that trust, the point where be careful about how much you're pushing them to consolidate everything with you. You may cause them to hide assets in a way that undermines the whole thing in the first place. So this is Office Hours with Michael Kitces, normally 1 p.m. East Coast time on Tuesdays. Obviously, our timing was different this week because I was speaking for Salesforce, now getting ready to speak for investments and wealth. But thank you for joining us, and have a great day, everyone.